Hi everyone. Today I want to talk about something that really infuriates me and that makes me extremely sad and angry. It's difficult to know what is more, what what emotion I'm feeling more. It is a kind of sadness and a kind of anger that has been um, growing for for a long time, I think. Um, It is this kind of sadness and anger that you feel when you are a transgender person living in a society that is dominated by cisgender people, and who many of whom will act very nicely to you, but only after you've gone through a lot of effort of explaining your identity to them, which is in a sense like something very unfair, I think, because it's something that um, is that it is kind of a given, more of a given for cis people in general. So we do a lot of explaining of our identities, and then maybe most people will act nicely to us, but in general, there's also still a lot of people who don't really support trans people, and there are many people who kind of half-heartedly support us, who see the choices that we make in our lives as lifestyle choices. Like, you could like be a guy, wear a dress. That could be a choice, but it would be just as something like starting to do yoga or something like that, While I think that kind of view of transgender identities, of trans people, is extremely dangerous and extremely kind of reductive and denigrating towards trans people, because in the end, what it comes down to for most of us is not so much that this is something that we do, something that we choose or something. It's who we are. It's not a matter of choice. It's not like a brave choice that you take to live outside of the box or something like that. Nonsense. It's who we are. It's like who you feel that you are in the depth of your soul, basically. And it is not this kind of like, yeah, it's not a phase. It's not a choice. It's not something we do to like challenge you to rethink your own limits or something, etc. It's not for you. It's not perform. That's also what I think my issue with the term, the idea that gender is performative. Yes, I guess it is performative, but the word performative could easily be taken to mean something like it's a performance, something that is outside of like your core identity. And for me, it is very much something that is part of my core identity. I don't know if it's the same for everyone. Anyway, so those are thoughts that are going around in my head a lot, and that make it sometimes very difficult to go outside in society and just interact with people, especially strangers to whom I don't really feel like I want to explain my entire identity to them, and it just becomes very exhausting to interact with people who are misgendering you, people who kind of see the dress you wear as an interesting kind of fashion choice or something like that, and who don't really like to not really be seen as the person you are by like a majority of people. It's very exhausting, and it becomes very tempting to just like stay in my kind of bubble, or my circle of friends who are who understand who I am and who view me as I want to be seen. That kind of environment, leftist people, queer people, and trans folks are often accused of staying in our quote-unquote safe spaces, staying in our bubble. But there's a reason for that. It's just really, really dangerous for us to go. It feels we're doing continual, like it's continually super exhausting and tiring and depressing to go out and interact with folks outside of our close circle of friends. I have my friends, and there I can just totally be myself. But when I go outside of that, I often have very unpleasant interactions or run into a lot of situations that are so clearly gendering and that then misgender me, or even situations that are just in general very gendering, that are very clearly trying to say this is a man, this is a woman, and there's nothing in between. That also is very offensive and very harmful to me, because I live with a partner. I am with a partner who does not identify as either a man or a woman. So every time I run into those kind of situations where like everything is split up into these binary genders, that feels, I mean, of course I can deal with it or something. It's not like I break down crying, but it feels exhausting to me. It feels depressing to me. So a lot of those things are really kind of weighing on my mental health. And then this week, there was the news of the leaked memo in the United States that the US Department of Health, I think, is planning to redefine or to start using a much stricter definition, an extremely outdated and kind of old-fashioned definition of what determines a person's sex. So what they're doing, as far as I understand, is they're trying to say, gender, whatever, we don't care, that's a construction. What it's really about is a person's sex. And when they say sex, they mean a person's biological sex. They are treating it the way this memo reads. They're treating it as if there's only two biological sexes, which is like the existence of intersex people proves that this is not true. But ignoring the science, which seems to be like a big deal, like a big point of the Trump administration, to always ignore science. So completely ignoring science, they're just saying like that you only have two sexes. An individual is either male or female, and when this cannot be determined at birth, then a genetic test should be undertaken so that the person's biological sex can be determined to an absolutely certain degree. I think really what they're veiling it as a kind of an attempt to create clarity or something like that, but really what they're really doing is this is just a very open and very clear attempt to effectively erase the recognition of transgender people by law. Because what they're saying is that it doesn't matter, like your gender, like whatever gender you have, it's just a performance. It's just like whatever you chose to, like however you choose to express yourself, it doesn't matter. In the end, you're just a man, right? Like you're born with a penis. You're just a man. That's what they're saying, like, or vice versa. Like you it doesn't matter, like whatever you change about your body, how you feel about yourself, how you present yourself, what pronouns you use, you're just a woman or something like that. And that is the most hateful and most denigrating and most authoritative totalitarian hate crime that I've ever seen happen at such a large scale that I've ever seen, in recent history. Maybe I'm just totally blind to so many things that have happened in the past. I know that there have been so many atrocities that have been committed against our community, and I'm just like, But this just blows my mind. So I shouldn't compare it to other things, but I know that horrible things have been done in the past, like, forcing people who want to go into transition to also be sterilized, for example. That's just one of the things that only recently ended in some countries, For example, that's another kind of example of cisgender violence against trans people. But this is something really big. This is a very big, large scale, and very hateful and very thought out attempt to erase transgender folks to erase them legally, basically, from the United States, and to make basically being transgender will become like something like denying what the law says about you, because your sex is your sex and you can't ever change it, and it will be determined for you at birth, and whatever you feel about it or whatever you think about it, or even what medical professionals think about it, none of that matters. Science doesn't matter, nothing matters. It's just like whatever this doctor decides, who checks your genitals when you are born, whatever your sex is then, that will be your sex forever. That just like, and that will be, and then by also saying at the same time that sex is like way more important than a person's gender, then you're basically saying like, okay, whatever gender you think you are, forget it, you're not it. And that's like such an intense, that is an incredibly excessive form of gaslighting people's personal feelings, their personal experiences, how they feel about themselves. It's like saying this entire part of your identity, you don't have any authority over that. We have the authority over it. And that's such a big part of your identity. If you look at how much gender identity, the extent to which gender identity is a big and very defining deal to the majority of heterosexual cisgender people, then you understand what a big deal this is, Like how many magazines exist that just purely exist to make men understand what it is like to be a man, and how they can be a better man, how they can become a stronger man, how they can work on their typical man's problems, how many organizations exist that are exclusive to either men or women. Like the cisgender folks in this world they have created this whole they have made gender into this huge thing, right? They've turned it into a huge deal. It's like everything to them, And then now they're saying that like we can't have that, like we cannot, like when we as trans folks want to create want gender to have a big role in our identity, and we view our gender as a core part of our identity and not just some little thing that we do as for fun or something, then they said no, that doesn't count. No, because you are supposed to define your gender based on your sex, which was given to you at birth and is immutable and unchangeable. I think this is the most outrageous discrimination against the particular minority that I belong to, that I've ever witnessed. Well, I don't think it's true. If I go back in time and I look at things that happened in the past, there will be similar things that happened, And I think, for example, just to think of one example, another example that comes to mind is the grand scale erasure of identities that did not necessarily fit the binary during the colonization of many places by Western colonizers. That is of a larger scale, I guess, than what is happening now. But this is definitely, within the United States context, really trying to turn the clock back to some kind of 1950s idea of sex and gender. And I think it's absolutely So maybe I shouldn't blow it out of proportion, but I think it would be an absolute disaster if these plans went through. And I think it is really important right now to say that, or to, if you consider yourself to be an ally of trans folks, don't just sit still right now. Say something about this, you know? Say that this is not okay. Just enough people who are very clearly, you know, making clear that this is not okay. That's already something, you know? And show up for trans people. Show up at protests against this. Go and protest this in every way that you can. This is something that really where we cannot just like rely on our own. But transgender folks, we may be very we may have a very clear community. We have a lot of because we're completely in charge of our own representation. We do a lot to make sure that we get some kind of representation. There is a lot going on there, but in essence, we're still just this really small portion, this really small part of society. And if you are, for example, someone in the LGBTQ plus community, but you're not really doing, like, you're not really caring that much about, like, you're not doing all that much for, you know, trans folks. You sympathize with them. You have some trans friends maybe, but really when it comes down to, you know, the grand scale erasure of transgender rights, you're like, it's not really my business. Then you are not a real ally. That is shitty allyship. So please try to see this as the first step, which undoubtedly it is, the first step towards the erasure of more minorities. Basically, we are a minority, and they're trying to erase us. And the way in which this traditionally plays out is that once one minority has been outlawed and erased, the next one will be up on the chopping block. You know, that's the truth. So this is not just a transgender struggle. This is a struggle of the entire LGBTQ plus community. And if we don't all work together to challenge this and to resist this really toxic, hateful initiative, then we will not be able to stop it, because we just lack the numbers if we're just the trans community fighting this. That's what I wanted to say. I really hope that you give a lot of love and support to your trans friends and everybody you know in that community, especially those who actually live in the United States, who are now facing a very real, a very frightening challenge to their right to exist, which is ridiculous. Why do you always have to defend your right to exist if you're a minority? It is the absolute violence of the majority that shows itself so clearly in these things. But enough, I will stop ranting. Show love, show support, ask them what they can use, how you can help them to fight this hateful ideology, this hateful decision or plan, I guess. It's still a plan, thank God for that. We're gonna keep it a plan that never happens, because this is an absolute disaster for the trans community in the United States. Okay, thanks, that's all I wanted to say today. I hope you tune in again for my next video.